Welcome to Building Better Relationships with Chuck and Barb Lewis, equipping listeners and viewers with the biblical tools to conquer the difficulties faced in this life. Chuck has practiced crisis intervention since the 1980s and has been in ministry together with his wife Barb for over 20 years. They've taken the countless lessons and the knowledge they've acquired and have put them into this life skills class to share with you. We hope this blesses you.
Well, we want to welcome you again to this program. I'm Chuck Lewis, and this is my wife.
Hi, I'm Barbara.
Yes, and we're going to be talking today about a topic that's very important to us, and I know it's going to be important to you as well, and that is about resolving conflict by placing high value on each other. And I've talked to a lot of people over the 47 years of doing this work that I have done. And I have found a lot of people, and maybe you're in that situation too, that you haven't heard a lot of people in your family valuing each other. Maybe you haven't felt valued as a person. And so when you think about placing high value on somebody, it's like, well, how do we do that? And so my wife and I are learning how to place high value on each other. And that's very important, especially in the midst of a conflict.
Right.
It's hard to put value on each other when you're really dealing with an issue that's very, very hard to deal with.
You feel hurt or angry.
Yeah, you're hurt, you're angry.
Yeah.
And when you're angry at somebody, it's like, well, how can I value them? You know, I'm too mad at them to feel any value. So it's a choice. It's not a feeling, but when we start making good choices, like we're trying to communicate with these teachings about communication skills and life skills, you know, it just makes it work a lot better. We're never going to get to a point where we're doing everything perfect, because we're not going to be perfect on this side of heaven, but we can practice these things. And practice, we say, practice doesn't make you perfect. It makes you better.
Right.
We try to eliminate that perfect word because that's not even realistic. But the more we practice, wouldn't you say it really helps us to get better?
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that happen to value someone is listening. When you're really listening, especially during a conflict, which again, it's not easy to do, because if we're hurt, the brain is lacking a lot of blood flow because we're in survival mode or we're in reactive mode, and so it's very hard to listen when you're impacted. But if we make the choice and ask God to help us listen, we can really feel valued by listening. And what does it make you feel like when I'm listening to you?
Well, it does make me feel like you value me. And, you know, one thing we've talked about is timing is important. Like, if it's something that I want to talk to you about and it can wait, like if you're watching a football game and what I want to talk to you about can wait, then I'll wait until the timing is better. But if it's something very important, or you know, something's going on that needs to be talked about right now, then I'll tell you that. And I really appreciate it if you make eye contact with me and you listen to me and like turn off the television. Otherwise, I feel like you're valuing the TV program more than you're valuing me.
Right.
So, you know, I think, like I said, eye contact and giving me your undivided attention, focusing on what I'm saying.
So we use a number scale a lot of times. If I am watching a football game and I'm really into it, and I do love to watch football. So if I'm really into a game and Barb says, you know, I really need to talk to you about something, I might say to her, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the number? And if it's anything over a 5, we've agreed to turn the TV off, because I can't even turn it down and have her tell me what's going on, because I I'm still seeing the plays going on. And so I get really drawn back to that. And so I'm halfway listening to her and watching the game, even if the sound is off. So I need to turn the TV off or hit the record button. That's basically what you can do, is hit the record button. If you can record it, that's good, because then you could kind of catch up after the conversation.
That's really a good point, asking each other on a scale of 1 to 10 how impacting it is for you, because personally, when I look at Chuck, he looks fine. So it doesn't look like it's more than a 2 or a 3. He doesn't show that on the outside. So I know I've asked him that question sometimes, and he said, well, it's about an 8 or a 9. And I'm shocked, because he looks fine. So that's an important one for me to ask you, because otherwise I don't really realize all that's going on inside of you.
Well, because my faith sometimes gets in denial. And I don't even know how impacted I am. But until I start talking about it, and that's when I realize how impacted I really am. And that's the value of talking about it. And again, if you hear certain topics that really feel radioactive to you, you think, I am not going to touch that. I'm not ever talking about that. I think with us, our kids have been kind of a hot point that we've had discussion about, that has kind of caused us to, not kind of, but has caused conflict at times and been hard to work through. But you have to choose, look at what the hot buttons are in your relationship.
Money's a big one.
Money, oh my goodness, that's a huge one.
Yeah.
It could be sexual problems, it could be kids, it could be in-law problems, it could be a lot of things. But you kind of have to pick out, what is the most problem areas, and then get a strategy involved. And we try to do something that's very important. If the problem is really intense, is we'll say something like, I want you to know before we start talking about this, that I'm completely committed to you.
Yeah.
The walls of our marriage is completely intact. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you.
Yeah.
And I'm committed to you forever. Okay. And then we start talking about the issue. And in our natural minds, we can think, well, why would I need to say that? They know I'm committed to them.
Yeah.
But it's really important to say it. And, the Bible said, let the redeemed of the Lord say so. And you have to say so in order to say so. I know that's very, very deep, right?
That's very profound.
Yeah. But you can't think a say so. You've got to say it. So
we need to hear the words.
We've got to hear the words. And usually when we know the marriage wall is intact, then no matter how bad the conflict can be, we know we're committed, and we're always going to be. Okay. Because sometimes people will talk about a problem and it seems like the value goes out the door, because now we don't know if they're going to be telling us that they're going to be leaving us because we can't resolve this problem. But if you secure that and know that this is not a situation that we're ever going to leave each other over, we can usually get through that a lot better.
Yeah. And if you have a filter of abandonment and rejection from your past experience, that can make you afraid of that. So
totally.
We'll talk about that in another session. Filters are an important thing to learn about each other.
That's very important.
What your triggers are.
All the topics that we're talking about are going to really help you if you'll really hang in there and listen to these and go back and listen to them again. I know that I have to listen to things over and over before I really, really capture it and really get it into my spirit to where I can start practicing what I'm learning. I've had to do that all my life. And so just the fact that you have to go back and listen to something again doesn't mean you're deficient or something's wrong with you. Right. It just means that the more you hear something, the better you understand it. So another area that we try to do to put high value on each other, especially during a conflict, is using the speaker listener technique to repeat back what we're both hearing to let each other know that we really got what we're saying.
Right, because otherwise, if you don't know that you need to kind of mirror back or reflect back what the other person is saying, then in your mind, instead of listening to them, you're building your own case. You're thinking about what you're going to say. You're not listening to what they're saying.
Right, right. And if you're building your case, you're not hearing
Right.
the other person. But if I know that I'm going to need to mirror back what I heard you say, that forces me
Right.
to really focus on what you're saying,
Yeah.
because I want to be able to repeat it back accurately. And that's putting high value on you to do that.
Right.
It's saying I care about you enough to really make sure I not only heard the words, but then I got the understanding of what you're communicating.
Right.
That's a twofold thing.
Yeah.
I can hear the words and repeat the words, but I may not get the understanding of what you're trying to tell me.
Right.
And so we're really not communicating if that be the case.
Yeah, because we hear it through our filter of life experience, whatever our life experience has been. We might not hear or interpret correctly at all what the other person said. And if you don't reflect it back to each other, or kind of paraphrase back what they're saying, then you go with what you think they said, and you go with that as truth. And then that's what you act on. And it may be completely wrong.
Right. And we call that interpreting.
Right.
Because I can say,
Yeah.
well, I'm hearing what you're saying, but what you're really saying is,
Yeah.
and then I start interpreting something totally different
Yeah.
than what you're communicating. And they can just add to the conflict.
Right.
Because now we're really frustrated, because now it's like, no, I'm not saying that at all. I can't believe you're saying that. I'm telling you that because that's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah.
And people can have a conflict over that, and that's not the original conflict
Right.
that we even had.
Right. And for me, I tend to have I tend to think about things like catastrophic thinking is one of my problem areas. And I think that's from a lot of fighting when I was a kid. Growing up, whenever there was conflict, seemed really terrible. The way I observed it as a kid and interpreted it was that it was terrible. It was irreversible. Things would never be the same. It was over. And that's how I interpreted conflict. So I wanted to avoid it at all costs. So sometimes when you tell me what you're thinking and feeling about something, I think, wow, it's over. He's never going to do that again, or he's never going to be there again, or whatever. But that's not what you're saying at all. But that's how I'm interpreting it.
Right. And if we haven't been heard growing up and valued growing up, it's like our subconscious mind is saying, well, I've never been heard and valued before. And you're acting like you want to hear me and value me. And my subconscious mind could be saying, you know what, she's trying to set you up. She wants something. She doesn't care about you. She's not really listening to you. All those things can be going on in my mind. And so I need to be speaking to my mind and saying, now look, that was real then, but it's not the same thing now, because I'm making a choice to believe what you're telling me. And I'm choosing to believe that you care enough to listen to me.
And love believes the best about someone. We have to be reminded of that. I mean,
Right.
I do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we see each other as the enemy.
Yes.
And we're not each other's enemy.
No, we're not. But it can feel just like it did with our family.
Yeah.
And if you go with those feelings of the way it did with way it was with our family, then we kind of cut each other off at the knees, because we're not giving them the chance to really explain what they're thinking and feeling. So valuing them is a choice. It's not a feeling. You don't have to necessarily feel it to do it. And if we had to feel it to do it, a lot of people wouldn't do it at all.
Right.
But you can make the choice to value them. And what I do a lot of times is I ask the Lord to help me value you the way God values you.
Mhm.
And if I can see you through God and know how much He cares about you and how much He's valuing you, then I can choose by the act of my will to do the same thing.
Right.
I can't always feel it, but I can choose to do it.
Right.
Now, every once in a while, I've talked to people that have had that same issue, that they didn't feel it. But if they did it over time, sometimes the feelings start attaching to it to where they say, yeah, I eventually started feeling like I did value them. It was an actual feeling that I felt. There was such value that started coming. And you can ask God for that. You can say, Lord, I've been in a very devaluing, dishonoring atmosphere, and I need a miracle. I need you to change my whole way of thinking and to put in a new tape in my brain to where I can think about valuing others the way you do.
Mhm.
And God will help you with that. When we call upon Him, He's willing to help us with this. In conflict, we should always ask the Lord to help us with the conflict, no matter if it's a small one or a big one. Small ones can turn into big ones, and we didn't see that coming. So you can always ask the Lord to help you before you start talking. Lord, help me with this conflict. Help me to resolve this conflict and help me to do what you said to do in your word to make every attempt to resolve conflict.
Mhm.
Now, making every attempt to resolve it is not a guarantee you will, but all you have to do is take responsibility for your part. You don't have to take responsibility for the other person. You just take responsibility for your part.
Right.
And so when you have somebody that doesn't want to resolve the conflict, what are you thinking about when you're trying to resolve it with them and they don't want to resolve it?
Hmm. Well, if it's in a marriage relationship, I think you need to, ask some questions about what's going on, because there might be some things going on that you don't know about. And I think sometimes it's good to take a time out
Mhm.
when you're having a conflict and come back to it, because maybe they're still too angry or upset to want to work it through to completion, or they might not believe that you can do that. They didn't experience that in previous relationships or at home. There was no resolution. It just got worse instead of
Right.
getting better.
Right.
That's what I experienced before we got married. And so it's I think it's learning to hang in there with each other and keep trying. Like sometimes with you and I, we have to take a time out and talk about something 3 times
Mhm.
to get through it. And I've noticed with me, that sometimes it takes me those 3 times. Like if it happened today, talk about it tonight, and then end up talking about it again tomorrow. I need that time to distance myself from the feelings so that I even can talk about it.
Right. Absolutely.
So,
So good. That's such a good point. Because if you keep trying to talk about it when you need a timeout, you're pushing something that's going to possibly just get worse.
right.
So if you take a little break and settle down and rethink, write some notes down, write some feelings down to work through those, then you can come back and talk about it later. Well, I hope this has helped today. And again, the key word here is practice. Well, practice does not make us perfect. It makes us better. The more you practice these tools and skills, the better you'll get at it. And you can learn so much about each other. And I've learned so much about Barb, in the course of 27 years of marriage. And I continue to learn. And I want to keep learning. I want to keep growing with you to find out more about you and more about how your filter reactions are and your past has affected certain things, so that I can offer healing in those areas. God put us together to be a healing agent for each other, not totally, because God is the only one that can do it totally, but we can assist in that healing process.
Right.
So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
If you are blessed by this ministry, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also make donations at chucklewisministries.com. Join us to keep uncovering the tools to build better relationships together. Let's do this again next week.